There is a box of salt in near every kitchen in the land, sitting in the cupboard, thought of as nothing but the thing you shake on your supper. It costs almost nothing, a few pennies for a great box of it. And most folks never imagine it is good for a single thing beyond seasoning the food. But salt is one of the oldest and most useful things a household ever kept. So prized in the old days that men were once paid their wages in it. And it will do a dozen jobs about your house that you now buy special costly products to do. It cleans, it scours, it puts out a fire, it saves a spill, it soothes a sore throat, all from that cheap box in your cupboard. Today, I'm going to give you 10 of the best old uses for plain salt. And you may never look at that box the same way again. I am Emily, and on this Lancaster County place, we set great store by the few plain cheap things that do many jobs, the vinegar, the baking soda and salt right along with them. My mother kept salt, not just for the table, but for the cleaning and the curing and the odd remedy, a great crock of it, and reached for it near as often as she reached for water. It is one of those humble old things that a body who knows its uses need never be without, and it will save you a good deal of money besides. So, let me show you what that cheap box of salt can do. Now, before I go any further, I want you to get your copybook and a pen. This is knowledge that's been passed down, and it's worth writing down for yourself. The ways of our people are simple, but they are rooted deep in the wisdom of the natural world. We are taught to be separate from the world's ways, but this is about the good earth and what it provides. It's time the old knowing was shared freely. I think of how my grandmother spoke of salt, for she had heard from her own mother how dear it once was, hauled in by the barrel and guarded, a thing you did not waste a grain of. In the old days, before there was an icebox in any house, salt was what stood between a family and hunger through the winter. For it was salt that kept the meat from spoiling, salt that put up the fish and the hams to last till spring. A family's salt was near as precious as its flour. And so the old people learned every last use of it in the kitchen and out and passed that knowing down. My mother still kept her great crock of it and used it a dozen ways. And though salt is cheap as dirt now and we think nothing of it, that old knowing of all it can do is worth the keeping. That is what I want to hand you today, so get your pen ready for the first one. The first use is for cleaning a flat iron that has gotten something stuck and scorched onto its face. That sticky, burnt mess that fouls the smooth plate, so it drags and marks your cloth. Salt lifts it right off. You heat your iron good and hot, and while it heats, you take a sheet of paper, a plain piece of wax paper or newspaper, and sprinkle a good, generous layer of salt over it. Then you run the hot iron back and forth over that salt for a minute or so, and the salt scour and grabs the burnt, sticky residue right off the face of the iron and clumps it up onto the paper. When you are done, the plate of your iron is clean and smooth again. Squeaky clean with no harsh chemical and no scratching. The salt does the scouring, gentle enough not to mar the iron, but rough enough to lift the mess. It works because each little grain of salt is a hard, sharp crystal, a tiny scouring stone. And dragged hot across the fouled plate, the thousands of them together scrub the burnt stuff loose, while being softer than the iron itself, so they do not scratch it. Fine table salt does well, and a coarser salt scour harder still if the mess is stubborn. Write that down, and you'll save your iron from many a scratch. The second use, and here's a trick for the next time you have a kitchen mishap, is for cleaning up a dropped egg. One of the messiest little spills there is for a raw egg dropped on the floor spreads into a slippery, slimy puddle that you chase around with a rag and never quite get. Salt tames it. You sprinkle a good healthy dose of salt right over the spilled egg and let it sit 10 or 15 minutes. The salt draws the wet out and firms the egg up, coagulates it, drawing that runny, slippery mess together into something firm you can simply sweep or wipe up in one go right into the dustpan or a bit of paper with no chasing it about. It seems a small thing until the next time you drop an egg, and then you will bless the trick. And it works on other slippery, wet spills of that kind, anything runny and hard to gather. For the salt draws the moisture and firms the mess so you can lift it in one go, rather than smearing it about and using half a roll of paper. Salt turns a slippery chase into a simple sweep. Put that one in your book next. The third use is the most important of all, and it may one day save your house or your life. So heed it well, and it is putting out a grease fire. This is a thing every soul who cooks should know cold. When grease or oil in a pan catches fire on the stove, as it can in an instant, you must never ever throw water on it. For water on a grease fire does not put it out. It explodes it, throwing burning grease everywhere and turning a small fire into a disaster. So, water is out, but salt will smother it. You grab your box of salt and you pour it, a great deal of it, directly onto the flames, and the salt smothers the fire, cutting off the air it needs to burn, and puts it out. So keep your salt handy by the stove, and if ever the grease catches salt on it, never water. A lid clapped over the pan smothers it too by the same cutting off of the air. Now I will say plainly, this is for a small grease fire caught at once a pan on the stove. A fire that has spread and grown is past a box of salt, and then you get everyone out and call the fire brigade and do not be a hero. But for that sudden pan of flaming grease, the salt is your friend, and the water is your enemy. And knowing that one thing may save you a terrible loss, and understand why the water is so deadly here, for it is worth knowing. The burning grease is far hotter than boiling. So when water hits it, that water flashes to steam in an instant and blasts upward, throwing the burning grease up and out in a great ball of flame, spreading the fire everywhere at once. That is why a small pan fire becomes a burning kitchen the moment water touches it. The salt being dry does no such thing, it only smothers, laying over the grease and shutting out the air. So teach this to everyone in your house, the children too, when they are old enough to be near a stove. For the instinct in a fright is always to reach for water, and that instinct must be trained out. Salt or a lid, never water. Keep the box of salt within arm's reach of the stove, where you can grab it without thinking. This is the most important one to write down, for it is a secret that can save lives. The fourth use is for a pan with food burnt and caked onto it. That scorched crust that will not scrub off no matter how you work at it. Salt lifts it. You cover the bottom of the pan with a good layer of salt, and then add a little water, just enough to wet it into a paste. And let that salt and water sit in the pan about 10 minutes. The salt works at the burnt food and grease, loosening its grip on the pan. And after it has sat, you can simply wipe the debris away, where before it would not budge, and go on with your day. It is a fine, gentle way to clean a scorched pan without scratching it or scrubbing your arm off. And it is a special friend to the cast iron, for it cleans without stripping the pan's seasoning the way soap and hard scrubbing would. For a cast iron pan, you can even scour it with a good handful of coarse salt and a stiff brush or a wadded cloth while it is still a little warm, no water at all. And the salt scrubs off the stuck food and the grease, and leaves the pan clean and its seasoning whole. And then you wipe it and rub it with a little oil, and it is ready for the next meal. The old cooks cleaned their iron this way for generations with salt and never with soap, and their pans lasted a lifetime and more. Handed down black and smooth as glass. Salt is the cast iron's best friend in the cleaning. Write this down, especially if you have a good cast iron skillet. The fifth use follows right on. For when you have cleaned that pan, your sponge or cloth is like as not left nasty and greasy. And rather than throw it out, you can freshen it with salt. You fill a bowl with a couple cups of water and dissolve a good quarter cup of salt into it. And you set your dirty sponge down into that salt water and leave it to soak overnight. By morning, the salt water has drawn the grease and the nastiness out of the sponge, and it comes out fresh and clean and ready for use again. It saves you throwing out a sponge before its time, and freshens a cloth gone sour besides. Write that down. It's a simple thing, but it saves money. The sixth use is for the stains in a bathtub or a sink or on porcelain. Those stubborn stains that the ordinary washing will not lift. Now, some folks reach for harsh chemical scouring powders, or worse for this, but you do not need them. You take salt, which is a fine, gentle scouring grit, and you pair it with a little vinegar or the juice of a cut lemon, and there is your tub scrub. You can sprinkle the salt right onto the stain, and then scrub with half a cut lemon. The salt doing the scouring and the sour of the lemon or vinegar, cutting the stain and the hard water crust, and together they lift those stains and leave the porcelain bright and clean. It is cheap, it is gentle on the porcelain, and it fills your house with the smell of lemon rather than harsh fumes. Salt and a lemon or salt and vinegar, and your tub comes clean. It is fine for the rust-coloured and hard water stains, especially the kind that build where the water drips and sits, for the acid of the lemon or vinegar dissolves that mineral crust while the salt scour it away. One honest word, keep this off any natural stone or marble, for the acid can etch those. But on porcelain and enamel, and the ordinary tub and sink, it is a gentle and effective scrub. Make a paste of the salt and a little vinegar for a stubborn spot, and let it sit a while before you scrub. And even an old stain gives way. Note this one down, for it's a secret to a clean bathroom without the harsh fumes. The 7th use is for a clogged or slow drain. The same trouble I have spoken of before, but with salt added to make it stronger. When the water will not go down, first clear away what hair or debris you can reach by hand. Then you make your foaming cleaner. A 1/4 cup of baking soda and a 1/4 cup of salt mixed together, poured down the drain, and after it about 1/2 cup of plain vinegar. It will foam and fizz up in the drain. The salt adding a scouring grit to the foaming action, and you let it sit and work a good 15 minutes. Then you boil a kettle of water and pour it down to flush the whole thing through and clear out the loosened gunk and any leftover powder. Now, the honest word as before, this works on the grease and the soap and the light clogs that build up slow, but a drain truly blocked solid may want a plumber. For the common slow drain, though, the soda and salt and vinegar is a fine, cheap thing to try before ever you reach for the harsh drain chemicals. Write this one down too. It's a powerful, natural remedy for a common problem. Now, those are the 7 that clean and mend about the house. But salt does more yet, and I will give you 3 more from the kitchen, for it was in the cooking and the keeping of food that the old people prized salt most of all. The 8th use is to keep cut fruit and vegetables from browning. You know how a cut apple or a peeled potato will go brown and ugly in the air in short order? A little salt keeps it fresh and white. You dissolve a small bit of salt in a bowl of cold water, and you drop your cut apples or peeled potatoes into that lightly salted water, and it keeps them from browning while you work, holding them fresh and white until you are ready for them. Only use a light hand with the salt and a quick rinse after, and your fruit stays fair. It is a fine trick when you are peeling a great mess of potatoes or slicing apples for a pie, and cannot use them all at once. The old cooks kept a bowl of the salted water right by them as they worked, dropping each piece in as they cut it, so a whole afternoon's peeling stayed fair and white till it all went in the pot together. This is a good one for your book if you do a lot of canning and preserving. The 9th use is a pair of old kitchen tricks with eggs. The first, if you would poach an egg, a spoonful of salt added to the simmering water helps the white of the egg to set up firm and hold together rather than spreading into ragged wisps, so your poached egg comes out neat and whole. And the second is a way to test whether an egg is still good, which every household that keeps hens should know. You take a bowl of water and stir in a good bit of salt to make it salty, and you set your egg into it. A fresh good egg is heavy and will sink and lie down on the bottom. An old egg has lost moisture and gained air inside its shell. So a bad old egg will float up, and one just starting to turn will stand up on its end. So sink is good, float is bad, and you can check a doubtful egg in a moment before you crack it into your good batter and spoil the lot. The reason it works is plain once you know it. For an eggshell is not perfectly sealed. It breathes a little through tiny pores. And as an egg ages, it slowly loses its moisture out through the shell and takes in air in its place, growing a larger and larger air pocket inside. A fresh egg has little air, and so is heavy and sinks. An old egg has a great air pocket, and so grows light and floats. It is a wonderfully reliable test, and any household keeping hens where you may have eggs of different ages about, and one you are unsure of, does well to know it. A quick dunk in the salt water tells you true before you trust the egg. You'll want to write these 2 egg tricks in your copybook for sure. The 10th use is a soothing old remedy. And here I must give you the plain honest word first, as I always do, for I am no doctor, and this is no cure. A warm saltwater gargle eases a sore throat. When your throat is raw and scratchy and sore, you dissolve a spoonful of salt in a cup of warm water and gargle with it a mouthful at a time and spit it out several times over. It soothes the soreness and can help draw down the swelling and ease the throat. And it is a comfort that has been used for a very long time. But hear me plain, this only soothes. It does not cure. And it is no substitute for a doctor. If a sore throat is bad or hangs on, or comes with a real fever or trouble swallowing or breathing, that is a doctor's matter and not a thing to gargle away. So see one for the ordinary scratchy sore throat, though the warm salt gargle is a cheap old comfort that truly helps. It works by drawing the way salt always draws the water, easing the swollen tissues of the throat and helping to loosen and wash away what irritates them, and the warmth of it soothes besides. Gargle it several times a day while the soreness lasts warm and not too strong. A good spoonful to the cup. It is one of the oldest home comforts there is, and gentle enough for near anyone old enough to gargle without swallowing it. Write this down as a remedy to try when you feel a cold coming on. Now let me say a small plain word, not a who prophet sermon, for salt is no one's scheme, only an old cheap friend. But there is a thing worth noticing in it. Here is one cheap box, a few pennies, that scour your pans and cleans your iron and puts out a fire and soothes your throat and keeps your food. And yet, we have been taught to buy a different costly product for every one of those jobs. The special pan cleaner and the scouring powder and the drain chemical and the throat lozenge. A whole cupboard of dear bottles doing what one box of salt would do. There is money in selling a man 10 products, and none in reminding him that the cheapest thing in his kitchen already does the work of them all. So the old knowing of what plain salt can do got crowded out by all the bright, expensive bottles, not by anyone's scheme, just by the plain drift of things, and folks forgot. The old people forgot nothing of the sort, for salt was too precious and too useful to them to be thought of as mere seasoning. So there are 10 good uses for a plain box of salt. And there are many more besides. It cleans your scorched iron, tames a dropped egg, smothers a grease fire, lifts the burnt crust from a pan, freshens a nasty sponge, scours your tub bright with a lemon, helps clear a slow drain, keeps your cut apples from browning, sets your poached egg, and tests your doubtful ones, and soothes your sore throat. All from that cheap box in the cupboard you thought was only for the table. Keep it handy, and you will find you reach for it again and again. Now I want to hear from you. Tell me down below what you use salt for around your own house and kitchen. For I know the old cooks and housekeepers among you have a dozen tricks I have not named. And tell me, too, what part of the country you write from, and whether the salt fire trick or the egg test was new to you. For these old bits of knowing are exactly what get lost, and I like to see where they still live. I read every one. Next time, I want to show you the greatest old use for salt of all, the one it was most prized for through all the long ages before there was any icebox. The curing and preserving of food with salt, the hams and the bacon and the saltfish and the rest. How the old people put up their meat to last the year with nothing but salt and knowing. The old people knew that a few cheap plain things, salt first among the oldest of them, would do the work that we now fill our cupboards with costly bottles to do. And they kept those things, and knew their every use. There is a quiet wisdom in it in the humble box of salt that seasons your food and cleans your house and mends a dozen troubles, all for a few pennies. The people who built this country with their hands knew that, and I am passing it on to you.